flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin the meeting with a moment of silence. And please remember in your thoughts and prayers Robert Schmidt, who passed away this past week. I'd like to announce the meeting is being recorded and televised by the local cable company. Approval of bill and payroll warrants. A motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Accept correspondence in the read file.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Public forum. Now's the time for someone to speak about an item that's not on the agenda. Approval of meeting minutes, open session February 19th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And open session April 2nd, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'd like to take one item out of order under new business. I'd like to do the public hearing with respect to the petition of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 520 feet plus or minus of 2-inch gas main in Hogg Memorial Drive from the existing 4-inch main at Corthell Avenue, westerly to the end of main at lot number 25, and approximately 300 feet plus or minus on National Drive from the 2-inch gas main on Hogg Memorial Drive, southerly to the end of main at Viking Drive in order to provide gas service to 14 new homes. And I'd like to do it out of order so that the gentlemen that are here from National Grid can get back to where they came from, which isn't close to Whitman. Someone from National Grid here? Hi. The women, I'm sorry. My God, that was terrible. I apologize for that.
That's no problem, no offense taken. Speak now.
Okay, well,
Okay.
yes, you may speak now.
Yes, the National Grid hereby respectfully requests your consent to install and maintain approximately 520 feet more or less of 2-inch gas main on Hogg Memorial Drive in Whitman from the existing 4-inch main at Corthell Ave westerly to the end of main to the lot at lot number 25, and approximately 300 feet more or less on National Drive from the new 2-inch gas main on Hogg Memorial Drive southerly to the end of the main at Viking Drive in order to provide gas service for 14 new houses.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Does anyone have any questions? Do you have anything to add, or that's pretty?
That's not the
Yeah,
street.
I know,
Obviously, you wanna
I
do.
just repeated what you said, I
That's okay.
know, but
It's all right.
it's pretty basic because it's a brand new, it's all brand new main, so
Okay.
it's,
There's a question?
Yes, if you could come up to the microphone and identify yourself, please.
Mike Johnson, I live at 34 Hogg Memorial, and you show your safety.
Mike, they can't hear you
you'll have to
on
come.
the speakers are.
hello, good evening.
You want to see it?
Absolutely, yes,
That's my house.
yes,
I got a gas line right here,
right, I
And-
understand that.
and so you want to change that?
I do not. We do not. We will not change yours at all. It is existing. That will remain the same, and we will pick it up from here on Corthell.
That isn't Corthell, that's, okay, that goes,
Yes,
that,
Corthell, yeah, see how
Yeah.
Corthell comes out? We're just
now
hooking
that goes
right
up to
there.
the school.
Yes, right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
That's
We
not-
will not do anything at all to your
I
service.
didn't know that was Corthell Ave.
Yeah. That's not
Okay.
right?
So you're not changing mine at all?
Not at all. If you have a gas service, it's going to come off this existing 2-inch plastic, and it's going to remain the same.
Okay. And so when you did
So-
replace this, you took out the shut-off.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Oh, I will take your.
And I was curious why they took the shut-off. How are you going to shut the gas off in my house?
I will, honest to goodness, I'll get back to you
Yeah,
on
they
that
took
one.
them off all of them, I
Okay,
believe.
yeah, I'll get,
And they said they put another pipe up through the existing pipe to the new gas meter. Is that true?
yeah, if they're saying that it's an insert?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
never heard
that
about
would
that
be,
either.
that would be an,
Street they just
yeah, that's
repaved.
how they would handle new gas, because when they relay the gas, they do an insert red, so that they don't, they don't dig up your lawn.
Well, they never told us that
Yeah.
either.
Oh, yeah,
So
So-
we got a smaller pipe than we had before.
yes. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I have a generator that's hooked up to this system. Now, it's
It's-
not a plastic pipe that the town made me put in irons pipe, but plumber had to come in and actually put the pipe in for this generator.
Okay, yeah.
And it's the backside of my house.
Okay.
How's this smaller feed gonna affect that? Is this gonna affect it at all?
Yeah, no, it's not gonna affect your house at all, because you're coming off the existing 2-inch
Oh,
right
so I'll be
there.
the same.
Yes,
So
yeah,
it's
this
not-
is a whole new development, right, from,
Oh, yeah, I know,
Yeah.
I see
Yeah, I
them
know.
50 feet from my
I'm sure.
bedroom window every
yeah,
morning.
yeah. No, I would say that you won't be affected at all by the new gas main.
Okay.
It's on the existing.
Okay.
And that's pretty, fairly new, it's a plastic, so that's fairly new anyway,
Yeah,
right?
oh, yeah, I saw the whole thing when,
Yeah,
because I put it like this. I
Yeah,
got nothing
okay.
better to do than watch you guys work. So, all right, I'm fine.
okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming up.
I have a question.
Yes, Dan?
I have one question.
Sure.
Frank, you may know the answer. What street did they just redo? Homeland Drive or Hog Memorial? They just resurfaced one last year, the year before? One of those streets. Where you're putting in the pipe, you're not digging up one of the new, we just redid one new street.
So the town actually did the relaying, because a lot of times they'll put down pavement in order to get the construction trucks down the street. And that's just temporary.
No, we did
That-
not put
so if it was-
roads into where it was done.
No, that's not.
Right.
So if there's a hard surface put down,
Yeah.
that was perhaps the people that are doing the contractors that are
Right.
doing the
And-
building, the
and
builders.
I do not know if the town is ready to, the street that you'll be running that down, I do not know if the town is ready to resurface it. But what I would ask, if you can just make sure, like when you did my street,
Yeah,
you can see the groove, you can see the drop. They never came back
Oh,
and
okay,
finished it off.
yeah.
So they need to do a better job.
right.
And bring it to street level, so when we plow it in the winter, it's not as bad.
If that street is not paved, it'll go into the dirt.
Yeah, I know that, but
and-
my
yeah.
street was paved, but
Right.
when you repaved
I
it,
understand.
it's
Yeah.
dropped. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just one thing
Okay,
that I
yeah.
noticed, that
All
people
right.
have asked me about,
Okay.
but just to be aware of
And
that.
what street do you live on?
Lance Ave,
Lance, Lance?
yeah.
Okay.
It's off of school.
TZ,
Easy,
okay.
yeah.
I'll
Anyone
bring
else?
that up.
Anyone else have any questions?
Any other butters? Are there any other butters?
That was it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Town Administrator's Report, Frank?
Thank you. There are a couple of things I want to cover. Most of them will be in the budget piece, but I want to address something that has been commented about in social media over the last several days. And it alludes to some nefarious plan on my part to keep the schools from getting additional money by not capitalizing on the excess levy number that we're presented when we hold a classification hearing. I've also asked that the town assessor be present for this because I want to be clear on what our process is and what our process has always been. Each year, we hold a town meeting. We vote all of the appropriations for the year. We typically do not have a fall town meeting unless there is a need to do additional appropriations. At the time that we do town meeting, we estimate what our revenues are based on growth over the previous year's tax limit and additional construction or additional property development. In each year, when the assessors come to us to set the classification rate for taxes, we are presented with form an LA5, which is prepared using the DOR software system to show us what the potential tax rate will be, what the levy will be, and to indicate any excess levy we may have. In order for us to utilize that money, we have to appropriate it. We can't just spend it. Typically, our hearings to set the classification are in anywhere from late October to mid-November. At that point, we're told that we have an excess levy. In order to spend that money, unless we estimated it well in advance, we would have to hold a town meeting to make appropriations. And there is insufficient time between the time we become aware of what that number is and the time where we need to set a tax rate. Because if you're going to hold a town meeting, you have to advertise it, you have to have a minimum of 14 days, people have to be aware of what you're proposing to do. There has to be a plan to spend the money. And that all doesn't happen in 3 or 4 days. And if it's not within that window of time, and if we don't have our information into the DOR by at least Thanksgiving Day, our tax rate approval is going to be delayed. And if it's delayed beyond the first week of December, it is entirely likely that we would not have the ability to set the tax rate in advance of January 1st. And if that happens, we cannot bill our third quarter tax. We have to wait until April and bill a semi-annual bill. So with your permission, I'd like to ask Kathy Keefe, who's our assessor, to come up and explain that process and to explain why we don't have that information within the time necessary to plan those meetings.
I color-coded handouts. Excess levy capacity 101.
Thanks, Kathy.
You're very welcome.
Do we get a certificate of,
Thank
Yeah, completion and the evidence. So, what you have in front of you, color-coded, let me just explain what excess levy capacity is. It's the difference between the levy limit and what we end up actually levying. So on the handout I just passed out, we take, well, actually, there's a little yellow tab paper at the back. So separate that from your pack. That's going to be the levy limit calculation. So we know that pretty well in the fall. There are variables that go into that calculation, one of which is the new growth. For 2019, the new growth was not approved by the DOR until October 10th, nor was the valuation of the town approved until October 10th. So another variable is the debt exclusion. That was submitted to the DOR September 24th, but that really wasn't approved until November 5th. But so now we know what the levy limit is. The difference is the amount that Whitman taxes, and so on that recap packet, there are 5 pages, and there are several variables that go into what Whitman ends up levying. For example, we have on page 3 of 5 in the pink, local receipts that were not allocated, not approved until November 5th. The enterprise funds submitted October 11th. Section 3C, free cash that was not certified by the Department of Revenue until October 4th. So all these variables go into the figure that Whitman ends up levying. So back to page 1, if you look at the green shaded number, that number comes from what was voted at town meeting, plus there are some other variables that go into that, such as a snow and ice deficit. So we have that number. You take away the estimated receipts. That figure is a variable figure. It changes every year, and we're not really aware of how solid that figure is until it is approved by the DOR. Then that gives us what we are allowed to levy. And again, the difference between that and the levy limit, the legal levy limit, the difference is that excess levy capacity.
So Kathy, why can't we have this information available, say, late September or early October, so that we can actually plan on the use of the money?
Well, you know, we can try to do that, and I think in fiscal 19, I had it in a little earlier than fiscal 18, but I can only speak to my end, because what goes into this is from the office of the town accountant, from the office of the tax collector treasurer. So I'm just going to speak to the assessor's side. So the way the valuation works, and therefore the new growth, building permits are taken out through June 30th of the year prior to the tax year that we're talking about. So someone can come in June 30th and want to build a house. They have up until then. So then we use July 1st, the beginning of the new fiscal year, to now go out and inspect all of the building permits that were taken out from July 1 of the previous year through June 30th. Not all of that valuation is going to be realized in that year. Some of it's going to be partial buildings. Maybe the building permits that were taken out July the previous year, they're probably more complete. So we have to compile that information, get that put into the CAMA system. Then we have to look at the sales analysis. And we outsource, both of those jobs, the building permit inspections and the sales analysis. So it's a really tight schedule when you begin July 1st to have that done.
Now, in this particular year, I believe it was November 5th that the DOR approved.
The tax rate.
Our tax
But the
rate.
valuation was approved October 10th, so it's more than just the assessor's end. So the tax rate was approved. Of course, we have to have the classification hearing prior to the tax rate being approved. And then all of those other components, those variables in pink, are submitted as individual schedules to the DOR. So it's Schedule A1, and they go into a queue, and whoever is assigned within the DOR to your town, and it's many times more than one person, your, thing goes into a queue, and there are 351 communities in Massachusetts that are trying to get their tax rate set for January 1st. So it goes into a queue, and then there'll be a review process and then an approval process.
Now, I'm reasonably sure you can attest to the fact that I've been borderline harassing you for the last 4 years
100%.
to get those numbers, so.
100%.
I don't want people to think that we're sitting around saying, nah, we don't need to do this. The problem is putting the components together. I have asked Kathy to, within the next couple of weeks, schedule a meeting with Mark Carroll, the president of Patriot Property, to find out why we can't get these things done sooner, so that there's time for the
You want to explain who
accountant.
Patriot Property is and what
Yeah.
they do?
Patriot Properties is the company that we contract to, who actually goes out and assesses our properties, assesses all new construction and all renovations. Any building permit that's pulled will be viewed and assessed by Patriot Properties. They also provide us with the software that we use to manage the appraisal and tax process. Because we have a June 30th cutoff for new development, and many communities are still on January 1st.
Right.
While we get a little more value input, the price that we pay is we don't get the work done quickly enough to work with it and use it.
And also, I hate to interrupt you, but as far as our contract with Patriot, so they're not going to come out earlier than July 1st because they cannot bill us, because we cannot pay them until the next fiscal year.
And when do they typically start looking at doing physical assessments? It seems to me last year it was around September.
No, it was in July.
It was.
It was in July.
When did they finish?
End of August. Then there's the data input from the results of all the inspections. Then there's
And who does that?
Then there's Patriot Properties, and then the sales analysis as well after that.
Well, it seems to me there ought to be a way for us to have this information done in a sooner rather than later fashion, so that the information is available to us.
You know what, that may just be budgeting in order to get them to come prior to July 1st.
Can we set up an account, like a account that can be used in that year, and it just gets rolled over to the following year and they have Patriots come out, and we have at least an account to pay them?
They'd have to encumber the money.
Yeah, it's different fiscal year money. We can't use prior fiscal year money to pay for current fiscal year operations. I think when, and it seems to me it was in the late 90s that the town voted to change the assessment date to June 30th. I think I recall it happening back then.
Kathy, could you finish your thought? You were going to say something before.
Uh-oh, it's gone. Sorry.
So the other piece of the puzzle, which, again, I talked to Kathy earlier today about, is timely submission of information from the Public Works Department, from the
Right.
other units that provide input to this, to the town clerk, inputting all of that information. And I want to see if we can get together as a group and figure out a way to expedite that process. It's really unfortunate that we don't have an opportunity to hold the town meeting and appropriate this money. The DOR was in last Thursday, and I did talk to them about this. And there are ways that we can capture the money, and it would end up in free cash, but it would be small amounts. And that would be by reducing the estimated receipts. And when the receipts come in, that becomes additional revenue, and it goes to free cash, and it raises our levy because we estimated less on receipts, so we estimate more on the tax rate. I'm not really comfortable with that. I think if we're going to spend money, if we're going to appropriate money, people should be aware of it and should have an opportunity to come out and vote on it. But we are going to work to see if we can fix this problem. In a few minutes, we'll be talking about budgets, and one of the things I'm asking the board to do this year is to permit us to estimate excess levy. As long as we vote to appropriate it, it will be used to set the tax rate. And I'm estimating $350,000. If we take that number and we treat that as part of our levy, then the value of that $350,000 is reflected in the tax rate we set. I think it's a conservative number based on the last 7 of the last 10 years. And I did talk to Kathy about it, and it seems to be a reasonable number for us to use. So we'll be talking about that when we go through Article 2.
I just have one last question.
Sure.
What, Frank, is it in the town bylaws or a charter that we hold town meeting the first Monday in May? What happens if we change that to first Monday in June? Gives us one more month.
That isn't the issue. Whether we do it May 1st or
gives,
June
appropriate-
1st, it's not going to change this.
Yeah.
because this is things that happen from July to December.
Right.
Well, we could have captured the previous year's excess levy this year, right?
Only if we held a town meeting and voted to spend it.
So when we set this year's levy, and we were 363 under last year, is that what we were?
Yes.
Did you use that number as our new levy?
No, I can't. Once the tax rate's set, that number is irrelevant.
Because I did get an email, and I'm assuming that the chair did get it as well, that states, even though the full amount of the levy was not always available to the community, regardless of how much the limit was, regardless of how much of the limit the community has chosen to levy the previous years, it is still within Proposition 2.5, even if that number should exceed 2.5%. Which means this year, we probably have we could use add that money.
We could estimate 300,000, but it isn't that money. That money's gone.
Once we set the tax limit.
When we meet again in October and November, we'll be given an excess levy. And before we set the tax rate, we can appropriate that. If 350 is a good number, when Kathy comes in November, October, whenever we have our numbers, we will know how much we have. And as long as it's 350 or more, it's already accounted for. If it's less, then we have to figure out how to make it up.
Yes.
No,
Oh,
you're finished, right?
okay, thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Kathy.
I mean, this is a question I spoke with Kathy about probably 7 or 8 weeks ago when I called you and questioned why we were, in the last 8 years, our excess levy had seemed to be slightly out of whack coming from 2013. From 2008 to 2013, except for 1 year, we were within about $40,000 of our number. If you look at 2014 on, 400,000, 500,000, $1.4 million, 700,000, 300,000, and 361. And I understand your answer to me was they were guesstimates. We didn't know all the numbers from the state. I guess my question is when I've now started getting numbers, and there's actually a couple citizens that have been on this and emailing me pretty frequently. When I get numbers from other towns like Hanson that are within 25,000, 35,000, why aren't we able to do that?
Well, you know what, so I can't speak to other
I
towns.
asked that question today.
Yeah, what I do know about Hanson, I'm on the Board of Assessors for the town of Hanson. New growth is something that they have a handle on because they use in-house, meaning the staff in the office, to go inspect for the building permits as the permits come in. So they have a designated person in the office. So they're able to, as the building permits come in, go capture that value as it comes in. Not the case here in Whitman. We outsource that. So that new growth figure, which in the last few years is right around that $350,000 value, is we're not getting that certified by the DOR until October.
So by using this Patriot Properties in the last 10 years, it's cost the town of Whitman within Prop 2.5 limits, About $4.1 million of revenue.
Well, you know what, it depends. It depends on the year. There were years that our excess levy capacity was $74. It's the way all of those variables in the recap shake out. So there's more than one variable. It's not just new growth. It's not just the assessor's office. It's free cash. When does free cash get certified? It's the enterprise funds, everything in pink on whatever page of that,
Well,
page 3 of 5.
I'm not putting any blame on you, Kathy.
No,
but
right,
what can
right.
we do to get a better handle on this? Because obviously, as we
We-
sit in these meetings and we talk about Whitman as a revenue problem, we've left $4.1 million on the table that would have fell within Prop 2.5.
So the easy answer to that is to try to get these numbers sooner. That's the quick, simple answer, is if we can get to these numbers sooner, then we know where we are going into things. So that would involve many departments in Town Hall, several. The accountant, the assessor, the collector, the people that manage the enterprise funds, everybody.
Okay.
So you're saying if those departments were more efficient in reporting things, then...
Not so much, but if we were more collaborative, perhaps.
It sounds like you physically need somebody to actually be able to get out and tally up building permits too, which you don't have.
We don't have that. We outsource that.
And that's probably your biggest.
Well, so the
Right.
building permits directly ties to the new growth figure.
Yeah.
So, that's only a portion of it, but yes, you're right. You're right.
See, I also want to comment that when we estimate new growth, what we estimate is the initial estimate of value for a new building. When the properties are actually assessed and the values are set, you may have estimated new growth for a property at $300,000. But when the assessment is completed and the evaluation is made, instead of 300, it's 350 or 370. That's where that additional levy's coming from, because it's value above and beyond what was estimated when the permits were submitted. That's just part of it.
Right.
So they actually have to be valued in order for us to count it.
Plus, we do a lot more building.
I think it's pretty clear that part of the strategic plan that we're going to be working on would have to be a reassessment, a reevaluation, and a change in the process by which all these departments work together.
Yes.
So that we can get information quicker and not, as Randy says, leave so much money on the table under Proposition 2.5. It's looking at our operations from up here instead of staying down here.
Well, right, in the past, everybody had they're just one little piece to the puzzle, and perhaps everybody has to sit down to the same puzzle.
Might be a time to have a meeting with all department heads on that issue.
Okay, thank you,
Okay,
Kathy.
you're welcome.
That's a task that
Good
has
night.
to be done.
Fred Small, 87 Hilltop Road.
Yeah,
I stumbled onto something that I thought was appropriate in speaking to the DOR, having them answer some questions about Proposition 2.5 overrides and structures. And one of it was being able to utilize excess levy capacity the following year. While you lose the money, you can carry over the number.
Right.
And quite frankly, got excited, and Selectman Bezance and
are
myself.
you saying the same thing that Frank is saying?
Somewhat, but...
Are you
the
Well,
way-
no, he's saying something different, but then came around to mine.
Pardon me?
Originally, they were led to believe by a representative of the DOR that we could still appropriate that money. And Fred came in with Brian and said, look, I talked to this attorney, and he says, we can appropriate this money and use it, and it goes into the levy. It was bad advice, because once your tax rate's set, you cannot levy. You can't add to the levy.
No, but it's on the base for the following year. We've already been doing that.
Well, it's sort of, some of it is.
Yeah.
Some of it's lost.
That's what we discovered. Yeah, I
When
wanted to
when
bring
you're,
up-
when you're suggesting that what we can do for next year is to estimate how much excess levy there will be next year, we're coming up with the same ultimate solution, but doing something different.
Right, we're estimating early.
Okay. Dawn, it's tax levy lady.
Don Byers, 20 Russell
Dawn,
Road.
Thank you.
Do you know when we started outsourcing to Patriot for the assessed
Do I know when?
values?
No, I don't.
It's been at least 15 years, maybe longer.
Okay,
So it's
so
before
it's...
2013. 2014, that the mark.
Yes.
Okay. So I understand the constraints with the variables and the timeframes. I do understand what was explained, but if we've been outsourcing and using the same company for 10 years or more, then there was a period of time in 2009, 2010, when our excess levy was $22,000. As Kathy stated, 2011, the excess levy was $74. So I don't know what changed with the outsourcing company. Maybe they were more efficient back then. They certainly haven't been efficient to allow us more recently.
I'd like to answer that.
Sure.
Okay.
What changed is, those were the worst economic times the town ever went through. During that time, the collective valuation of our town dropped by almost $500 million. Building came to a halt.
Understood.
When they were going out to inspect, there was nothing
a lot
left
to
to
do, huh?
inspect. So it wasn't so much how they were doing it,
Okay,
it's what was occurring then.
okay,
And the big spike that we refer to in 2016, and it's an interesting part of this. We could have, had we known about it, and remember, we found that out the night we had the classification hearing. Nobody knew about that $1.2 million. We could have used that. But it's all based on personal property at National Grid. And that $1.2 million has pretty much amortized down to about, collective value now is somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. And in 3 more years, that'll be gone. If we had added that to the levy, all of that would have shifted to the residents, because it's just not there. It's not a permanent increase. So that, I'm not saying we shouldn't have done it. I'm saying if we had the opportunity to use that money and held a meeting, we would have.
right.
But the big issue for us is having enough time to do that and still set the tax rate in time to bill for January 1st.
I just see a trend in the past 6 years, as it was already mentioned. Randy mentioned the numbers. You know, if we had been doing our estimates as is and seeing this $400 every year, it sounds like maybe the estimates should have shifted a little bit to better prepare for that. We can't go back. But yes, I did find online Division of Local Services regarding Proposition 2.5. And it's important, Proposition 2.5, you know, tells towns you can't tax more than 2.5%. That's for a reason. But I have to say, it's not Proposition 2.25. I would really like to see, you know, us follow and tax and collect that revenue that we so desperately need. I'll just read 2 sentences from this paperwork, so I don't know, and it's kind of what Fred just talked about, so please clarify. It says, "It is within the law under Proposition 2.5 for a community to have excess levy capacity in 1 year, and in the following year to levy right up to the full amount of its new levy limit. This is true no matter what the percentage increase in the levy would be in order to achieve this result." So it's my understanding you add that new levy limit on top of the old, it is possible to have more than 2.5% and to legally collect that revenue available to the town.
Well, and that's what we're doing now.
Oh, that's, okay. That's my
It is?
understanding.
But, well, if we use the 350
Okay.
that I'm recommending, that's what we're doing. The only caveat is if in any year our estimate exceeds the levy, the excess levy, we will then be in a overspend situation, and we would have to come back and reduce budgets to conform. We can never exceed the levy. When the tax rate is set, it can never exceed the levy limit that's calculated based on new growth, tax estimates, or tax revenue, and other local receipts. It's one of the reasons they suggested lowering our local receipt estimate to capitalize on it.
So in 2018, the excess levy limit was 330,000. So presumably, we could have estimated 300,000 and collected that revenue in
Yes.
FY19.
If we had set the tax rate using that number,
Okay.
yes.
And the previous year, fiscal 17, it was 713,000.
And you'll notice, well, from year to year, it went down 300,000. So there's no guarantee that that number is going to continue to generate high numbers.
Yeah. I'm looking at Abington. This year, they have 6,500. Prior year, 13,000, 10,000, 4,000, 9,000. Maybe they're not using an outsourcing company. Maybe they've got someone who's accurately and getting all their numbers in together. But Abington, for the past 10 years, their total for 10 years excess levy limit is 102,000. And Whitman's is 4.1 million.
Now, thank you, Dawn, and I think we need to acknowledge the work that Dawn has done on this over the past period of time. She spent a lot of time on it, and every time she writes something down about these things, it makes sense. I just want to thank you, Dawn, for doing that. And I wasn't speaking off the top of my head when I said that one of the clear goals that we have to set up as we plan strategically for the next number of years is to somehow right this operation as far as the levy limits are concerned, and as far as the connection between the assessor's office and the other offices and the finance committee too. It would have been good, I suppose.
Easier.
Finance committee had noticed some of the same things that you noticed this year over the past 4 or 5 years, but we didn't either. But Dawn, I have to thank you for the work that you've done. Frank? You're still on, I think, Frank.
Okay, budget. Last week, the Finance Committee voted most of Article 2. Actually, opened a couple of questioned ones.
This a different one that I have?
Yes.
I can show this on the right.
Yes. And
The one in your packet, no good. I have too many. I keep throwing this one.
there's a couple of things to take note of before we get into this fully. On page, page 4, schools. The Finance Committee had recommended an 8.5% increase to Whitman Hanson. In speaking with the town administrator yesterday and today, I have a pretty good indication that they're going to support an 8.5 number. The recommended line for 175 that we have in this budget is 14,398,151. That's a number that was voted, recommended by the Finance Committee, and it represents an 8.5% increase over last year. I would ask that when we complete our review, the board consider voting to support that number. The next line, non-mandated busing, The requested number is 397,604. The Finance Committee had voted to recommend 173,471, which is a reduction of $234,000. The decision on that is one that would obviously have to be made at town meeting. There are many arguments for why we should look at charging for non-mandated busing. And I think that's a question that's going to have to be put to the town meeting to support either position, whether we choose to continue what we're doing or we choose to reduce that number and bill for people who want to use busing and are not, are within the distance that would provide for walkers. The next significant number is budget line 197, Health Inspector. The requested budget is 66,789. That is a 1% increase over last year. The recommended budget by the Finance Committee is 40,531. That would be reducing this position from full to part-time. Again, this is something that we should probably discuss. The next number that I guess I would consider controversial is line 410, and that's the DPW superintendent's salary. The DPW has requested $100,356. That is the same number that the Parks, Recreation, and Highway superintendent is paid. The 90,000 would be a reduction of 10,000, 17% decrease. And my understanding is there's been some discussion with the chairman of the Finance Committee, was told that today, where the Public Works Department is seeking to fund the 100,000 in order to have a funding line, but is considering offering a lesser salary. We don't have anything that supports that change. And then if you look at the far column, the highlighted numbers represent, I guess, what you would call a conceptual approach to how we handle compensation for particular employees. All of the managers have reduced their request for an increase from 2% to 1%. The Finance Committee has voted to recommend the 1% numbers for the department heads. What's come into question is the next level of employees, the clerical and administrative people who are not management and who are compensated at a different level. About 10 years ago, Board of Selectmen voted to set our policy guideline for a salary for non-union personnel to be tied to what we negotiate with the clerical union, the OPIU. So in this fiscal year 19 to 20, we're in the third year of a contract that provides for 2% increases to clerical employees. What they're requesting, what the employees are requesting, is that they be treated the same way as they have been in the past. They don't, for the sake of demonstrating that we're doing more with less, it doesn't appear to be a fair approach to hit those people on the lowest end of the salary scale with a lesser increase than their coworkers who happen to be in that union. So what I need to know tonight is what the boards would prefer that we do with this.
Okay, do you want to go in order or with, of the things that you just mentioned?
Sure.
And then if we can come to some sort of consensus on it, we could vote Article 2. The first thing you meant, right?
Well, I have a quick question. So, the last Article 2, I believe this board saw had 6.5, or it might have been 8.5.
It was a note that we had supported 6.5, but that the Finance Committee had supported 8.5.
Okay, so with the respective cuts then, to make up the $265,000, and how are we doing that?
We're increasing our revenue
Through a vote we haven't taken yet.
estimate. It's all part of this. That's what I presented at the beginning, that in order to make this number work, we need to estimate what that excess levy capacity would be, or again, we lose it.
Right, it's part of the package.
Well, would we be better off voting that and having the town administrator go back? What I feel like we're doing is we're now circumventing another board.
What board?
What board are we circumventing?
Sorry, another a committee, that if we now make our recommendation to estimate revenue, the town administrator goes back and that board then modifies their figure, that committee then modifies their figures. Did they make these cuts based on thinking they needed to make money up?
Right.
And the answer is yes.
But if now you go back to them and you say, we've now,
Rick is waiting for us.
what's that?
Rick Anderson is waiting for us to make decisions.
Right, so what I'm saying is if we make one vote that we're going to estimate revenue, I don't think we need to do this, that Frank can now go back and say, have them go back and alter as they seem accordingly.
Yeah, but Randy, there's two things in play. There's the request
Okay?
that's made on our end and the recommendations that are made on their end.
But what I'm saying is probably some of these recommendations were based off of thinking that they needed to cut,
Well, yes,
trying to get to the extra $265,000.
but I did have a conversation with their chairman this afternoon before our meeting, and his position is they want to cut those other salary lines in order to set a trend and tell people this is what we're doing. We need to show financial discipline. And I understand that argument, and I think we did that argument with the department managers. But I think we're dealing with a different class of employee. And while they agreed in principle that they should tie to the contract with the OPIU, they subtracted 1% from all of those employees simply because they're not members of the union and don't have that contract protection.
How much money are we talking about?
Couple of thousand,
How much?
couple of thousand.
Yeah, and
I mean, you go down the numbers,
There's a distinction between a supervisor.
500, 600.
Frank's making a distinction between a supervisor who's giving up 1% of the raise for the good of the cause, and a non-supervising, non-union person, who we have for a number of years treated just like we did the other union members. I agree with Frank that we should change that.
Yeah.
And the going to 8, whatever that figure was for the school, 8.5, the idea of estimating the excess levy limit will give us the money to do that. And that would be what I think Frank would bring
Right,
back.
what I'm saying is, once we did that, does Frank go back
They-
and they restore these numbers, knowing that, I just...
Yeah, they could restore the numbers, but I think what Frank was also asking is that we tell them that, we say to them that, and are looking at these numbers, we think these are the numbers that should be restored, giving them that kind of direction. And there can be a disagreement between what we vote on Article 2, or what we do tonight, and Finance Committee's recommendation. That's happened numbers of times.
Right.
And then it becomes
It
a
is,
town meeting
Article
thing.
2 is FinComs.
But it'd be nice to have us all go in with the same, I think Rick Anderson's goal is to have us to go in with the same idea, with the same plan. And I have a feeling, I think that
That's
what we're about to do
exactly
tonight would be the same plan. Anyway, let's go through it just to see what happens. Frank, the first one you looked at was the schools, it was 175,
Right.
line 175. You're recommending that the board,
Support an 8.5%
the board
increase.
support an 8.5% increase for the schools, or a figure of 14,398,151.
That's assuming that we're going to add in the 350 of the
Correct.
excess.
Exactly. Is there a consent, do we need a vote, or is there a consensus of the board on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of the 8.5.
We're all in favor of it?
I'm in
Okay.
favor, yeah.
Okay, the next thing that Frank talked about was the busing issue, non-mandated busing. Does the board feels it wants to take a stand on non-mandated busing?
I have a few
Or do you want to
questions.
leave it up to the meeting? The Finance Committee is recommending, I don't know why. Is there a rationale for going from 397 to 173?
I watched the chairman speak at the school committee, and basically, I believe they had decided to leave money in there, not pull it all out, to almost have a safety net for
Some people that can't do
families
it.
and parents that
So it's basically cutting it out, but leaving some money for people that might want to
Right.
petition.
in
Okay.
in tough
Can't pay the
situations.
full amount.
Mr. Chairman.
I got
They
it.
need help.
Yes.
I believe, if the information I got, if I don't mess this up, because Mr. Small, I had some questions I asked him, and he kind of tried to clarify that there are some who are on the reduced lunch,
Free and reduced lunch would automatically ride for free.
right, so that you can't charge them.
Right.
Well,
they don't
no,
get
no,
charged now, do they?
no, that's not accurate. What Fred is suggesting, that free and reduced lunch could be a method by which you determine whether or not,
Not according to the Commissioner of Education,
But-
Jay Sullivan.
yeah, and I'm waiting for Jay's call.
He told me you had a call up.
So that was just, I think, a rationale as why they were keeping some money out.
Right.
And
Because
the
there may
other,
be some people that are eligible
One
for it.
other issue.
yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'd like Fred to share. We've had some discussions on it, and I know one of it was how many,
This is about non-mandated
Yes.
busing,
Now,
right?
Yeah.
mandated busing.
All right.
on how the list is compiled on actually how many students are in that non-mandated.
Well, we'd still, right, we're gonna have to figure out how many are eligible, et cetera, but also, in speaking with Jay Sullivan, one of the driving factors is going to be based upon the regional agreement, and the way the currently enforced regional agreement reads is that if the school chooses not to pay for non-mandated busing, it shall bill the towns. So, that's just the way it reads, period. So we have to conform to that, how much we bill, and then who bills, sets the rates, and who bills the families would obviously come from the towns as well, and that would probably cause some additional
Steve, you have
costs.
no idea, do you have any idea how many families this is going to affect and what the cost is going to be?
I have not been able to get a number
So we're going to
yet.
go into a town meeting without that number?
That's why I have the 397 in the
You know,
requested cut.
I totally get user fees, it's, instead of spreading it, but don't you think we owe it to everybody to walk in there with some answers to the
Right.
questions they're going to
And that's
ask?
why I brought it up.
Absolutely, I'm still waiting for the answers to those questions myself.
My feeling is it may be something we have to look at. I don't think this is something you can implement.
Yeah, this should be a next year
In a
thing,
week.
it shouldn't happen in
I
this
believe- I
budget.
think
Right.
this has
There are
numerous
definitely
handouts.
other communities that do this. You know, they
Yes.
charge for sports, they charge for this,
Absolutely.
and this is one of those things. So I understand the philosophy, and I'm just wondering how many families are going to be impacted by this, what will the cost be?
And it would be,
And,
And how do you divide the subsidy?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that
If
need
you're
to
going
be
to
answered.
subsidize it, and how do you do it fairly?
now remember how this figure arose years ago? A group of parents went to a town meeting and said, we'd like you to pay for our kids to to be transported. And the town meeting voted that. That's the history of it. I've said this before, I'm wary of cutting non-mandated busing, but I also understand the logic to noticing what other towns do, and they charge for it.
Right, they charge, yeah.
I mean, we also need to look at how many more crossing guards we need to put on.
Right.
Right.
And it's a safety issue, too.
Right.
I'm concerned about younger kids.
Okay, is it the,
What is this?
is it the consensus of this committee?
The
that
budget
we
you
stick
have in
by it?
front of you includes the 397 funding.
And
Oh, really?
But it has a finance committee recommendation of
Yes.
173. Okay. I'd just assume right now.
So that
keep it the way it
wouldn't
is.
increase what we're spending.
It's calculated in the budget right now.
Okay, now, and this brings up other questions too. What about funding for transportation for people who choose to go to Norfolk County Agricultural High School?
Again, as Fred mentioned, I've been waiting for 3 days to talk to the guy
Why do we pay
in
for that?
charge.
It's some, it's like, yeah. So
It should be all in the paper.
that's an issue that we have to deal with the schools on, as we have to deal with, there are some issues that the schools and the town have to deal with that have less to do with this particular town meeting and more to do with the way we go forward.
Right.
That the old lack of a foreign language teacher in the schools in Whitman. It doesn't seem right to me that kids in Hanson don't have to be in a lottery and kids in Whitman do. It's just, that's not right. That's just not right.
Yeah.
There's a way to manage that. You can have a teacher go to 2 systems. There's a way to deal with that. We have to deal with the schools on some items like that, and we haven't done that yet. Assistant Superintendent Farrow did say at a meeting a few times ago that there are some inequities in the way things are divided up. And it's not the way the money's divided up, it's the way people, the place is managed. So that's not something for this particular town meeting, but it's something that we have, that's another thing in a strategic plan that we have to work on. So we got 2 things right now.
I just, maybe I wasn't clear in how,
Why don't you can share them with us if you'd like, Scott. Yeah.
I wasn't clear in how I was presenting it, and it could have come across wrong. I guess by what I'm saying, it's only because I'm looking at these numbers and that number wasn't in there. As we're putting things back that they cut, are we still allowing for the 8.5 for the school?
Yes.
Under the estimated amount? Okay.
Yes.
Because
And just for
don't see that in
clarification,
there.
the requests that went in there are our requests. We have not reduced our requests.
Right.
But the Finance Committee has made a recommendation for a lesser amount of money.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to do now is determine whether the board wants to follow the request or the Finance Committee recommendation. Because if your position is we want to support these requests, then my comment to the Finance Committee is we don't agree with what you've proposed on some of these line items, and if we don't have agreement, we'll discuss it on the floor of Town Hall and see what's supported.
Okay, so.
And it's always been our desire to go in uniform.
So far, we agree with the 8.5%. We disagree with the cut in non-mandated busing.
So the board wants to keep the request at 397,604.
Is that fair to say, board?
But at this year, yes, until we have a full year looking at it.
Right. I think it's something we need to
We need to
look at.
prepare parents
All
a
right.
year in advance.
Okay, what about the 1% for people who are not supervisors, who are near kin to union employees? We okay with that?
No, I personally feel that we made an agreement to the fact that because they're not eligible to be into a union, that we would agree that they would get what union got.
Okay, so
That's how I
I would
feel.
agree with
there's a
that.
consensus with that. Randy, by you? You're fine?
That's been past practice, correct?
Okay,
Yeah.
the last thing I think that Frank had brought up was the
Health insurance.
health inspector, whether she should remain full-time. Our recommendation has been consistently that she should. And the Finance Committee's recommendation has been consistently that she be reduced.
Last week, a motion was made by the Finance Committee to set the number at the request, which is 66,789. For some reason, she was started at a lower number than the other departments, and the 2% or the 1% would bring us to 66,789. And that recommendation failed on a 3-3 vote. So the previous recommendation to set the number at 4511 still stands with the Finance Committee. The original vote, I believe, was 5-2.
Then it went to 3-3.
And it went to 3-3 on a reconsideration.
It says here, the health inspector, their recommendation is 40,531.
Right.
Correct.
And that is a part-time?
No, it's the same hours as Town Hall department heads. It's 31 hours.
She works full-time hours.
Yes. 4-day, 31-hour work week.
Right. And but she's available 24/7
No,
Right.
it's 36.
for,
It's not 31 hours. Full-time employees work 31 hours in the town? I thought it was.
In the Town Hall.
Huh?
In the Town
In
Hall.
the town hall. I thought, for some reason, why did I thought it was 37?
Well, it's 37.5 at the police station.
Yeah.
It's 35 at the COA. Depends on the unit you're in.
Yeah.
It's 35 at the library. But it's 5-day 35. It's an 8-hour day with an unpaid lunch hour.
Yeah.
Was there a specific reason why they made this cut? Was there an explanation?
They felt it was a big increase last year. But beyond that,
but it was an increase that was
They added-
discussed at the town meeting.
the first question raised was what changed in the last 3 years to require this to go to full-time? And Eric Joubert was there to address the issue, and his most ardent argument was that the health inspector now is required to supervise animal control. I just see the number of instances where we're getting more condemnations. We've had 3 hoarding situations in the last year that she had to directly handle with other agencies, and all the surrounding towns of full-time inspectors. But again, it's an argument that the health board
Right. If I-
presented at the Finance Committee, and originally it was, the majority voted no, then it deadlocked.
Something to say?
Is there I'd like to find out if we can have a consensus on that, too.
Here's a question.
I have a que-
Yeah.
All right, Frank, last year at town meeting voted to make that a full-time position, right? This board voted to make it a full-time position.
Well, it wasn't a unanimous,
We never voted.
Second,
It was,
It never came up.
I got it in the minutes.
no, I think it was the health department that made the recommendation to the Finance Committee last year that the position be full-time.
Well, then I'm reading what we're gonna release later on. Wrong then.
what the board ultimately voted was to support the recommendation of the,
We had a meeting with the health board, and at that time, they didn't know what it was going to mean as far as extra work to deal with the animal control people. And I believe that we were fairly clear in saying to them that we would support them when they got more information and realized what it was going to be about. Subsequent to that, they went to the Finance Committee and
What does that
asked for a full-time position, and the Finance Committee granted it at that time. Is that your memory, Randy? I think that's what happened.
read it out loud.
I'm going to abstain.
My motion.
This is from,
We're going
What day?
to
It hasn't been voted yet.
this hasn't been voted yet.
No, no.
This is an
that-
executive session.
That's executive session.
It's tonight's, it's on tonight's.
Okay.
But
Those are executive session minutes, we haven't voted yet.
we haven't voted
I
on.
understand what you're saying.
Okay. But anyway, that being said, I think the extra responsibility, town meeting said that they felt that that was a good decision that was made by the Board of Health, the health inspectors, and they agreed, and now all of a sudden, they're saying town meeting was wrong?
Okay, well, let's give Frank, our opinion so that he can take that, he's waiting to go to the finance
You know,
committee.
part of the problem with this situation is it wasn't well discussed at town meeting. It was simply a rolling vote. So there really wasn't a discussion at the meeting itself as to the argument and the reasons. The health department did come and make arguments here. The health department did go and make arguments at the finance committee. But and it was recommended at town meeting, but there's more discussion.
Okay, so far we have a consensus on all the things we've talked about. The only thing outstanding is the health inspector. Do we want to take a formal vote on that, or we want to, Randy said he's going to abstain.
Well, the only thing that, I'll point out that I do recall and did support was extending the hours of the health inspector.
Right.
And I think subsequently to that, there was a big increase in the salary. It wasn't necessarily just tied to the hours. There was a different increase in salary that we didn't expect. And I think that's what might have caused this surprise, but I don't,
Yep.
Personally, I don't think that, I think it should be a full-time job. I mean, I think the reason we agreed on the 3.5 hours, it made sense, so I wouldn't
Yeah,
reduce the hours of that
The
position.
vote that we had was on increasing her by 3.5 hours, and that was to cover what she was going to do for the rest of that year. And then they subsequently went to the finance committee and asked for it to be a full-time position, and I think it ought to be. from
Well,
what I've
Mr.
seen.
Chairman, my opinion is that in all the time that I've lived in this town, this animal control part of this has never been better. We've seen tremendous stride and growth in how everything is handled. The kennel is, and the area down at the DPW is in much better shape. Calls are being answered, things are being taken care of in a timely manner. I can honestly say I've never seen that department run better than it is now. And I think it all ties into this, and with all the...
But personally, Brian, I think that's because of who we've now hired as the dog officer.
That very well could be. And I think it's a team, and you turn on the news every day, there's always some recall, there's some salmonella, there's some listeria, there's always something going on. This particular inspector, I think, is vital to the safety and security of food service and the general public now more than ever. And so I'm in favor of leaving it where it is.
I concur.
Yeah, well, yeah, I do, and Scott has said he thinks we need a full-time health inspector. It makes sense to have a full-time health inspector. So I think, Frank, do you have
I do.
most of a consensus anyway to let them know that? So, with that in mind then, is the board willing to vote on Frank's version of Article 2 with the understanding that some of the revenue is from an estimate
It's on the
of
last
excess
page.
tax levy?
I do have one question.
Yes, Brian?
The water and sewer superintendent was singled out. Is that to just make both superintendents the same salary? Or what was the reason behind
The-
singling him
Oh, I
out?
forgot that one.
From what I understand, the commission voted to set both salaries at the same level, the two superintendents. Secondhand from the finance chair, I've been told that it isn't necessarily going to be that salary, but rather that funding. And remember, when we go to town meeting and they vote all these lines, they're not voting salary. They're voting funding for the departments. Then it's up to the employer, in most cases, the Board of Selectmen, in the DPW's case, the Board of Commissioners, to set compensation and work conditions within the funding for the position. So it's not out of line if the commission decides they want to maintain that funding, but they're uncertain whether a particular person will perform that job, and should that person be compensated at the level that the former person doing it was. That's a decision for them to make, and it's town meeting's decision to either support or not support that position.
Okay.
Was it based on some sort of benchmark?
What's the
that
DPW
you think
commissioner
that
get?
That's a number we kind of need to have as a placeholder?
Yes, it's based on their last
So,
positions. So I don't think it's something I don't think we're in the position to tell the
Right. No, I was just
Board of
curious.
Commissioners that this has to be the same or that it has to be reduced. They're gonna have to make the argument
Okay,
for it.
you were going to direct us to the last page.
Yes.
And there in bold is the 350,000.
So this is our
Excess.
estimated revenues, and included in those revenues is an additional 350,000 to provide for anticipated excess levy capacity. If you work those numbers through, what happens is we can meet the funding that's requested, and we also were able to reclassify Article 7, which is the sidewalk plow, and Article 8, and I'm trying desperately to remember what that is, from free cash to levy. So that has the impact, when we vote Article 9, we've used what we estimate to be our levy.
Nice. Okay.
Then when you go to free cash, the remaining articles that some were free cash are now in the levy, that leaves us with 439 in free cash that's open for town meeting.
Okay.
So those are the best numbers we can come up with for revenue and expenditures. That leaves us in a position where town meeting acts to vote on appropriations. We then go to the election for the debt exclusion, which, if it's successful, will then enable us to come back and do the business that we postponed in order to provide for that funding.
Do you have what you need from this board now to
I believe so.
go to the Finance Committee? Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, financial management policies and objectives. Frank, you supplied us with some drafts.
Well, actually, over the last couple of weeks, after looking at some of the issues that have come up, I think we need to add more to it, but I'd like to, if there are no disagreements, I'd like to adopt the policy with the intent of further adding language to address handling the budget, to develop a process for being able to capitalize on our excess levy.
Someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion for that.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
And most likely, it would be in the special town meeting language. But what we first have to do is we have to get everybody on the same page.
Okay, all those in favor of adopting the suggested policies and objectives with that proviso, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? None. Performance review form. We have a performance review form that you're presenting to us also. Does anyone have any objections to begin using that form? Or does anyone need to look at it
Yeah.
further?
The only thing, and I just, looking quick, there isn't a spot for goals and objectives.
I thought there was.
I'm just trying to find it, because I kind of scrolled through the rest of it, looked better than some I've...
I think we have to add a page for that.
Okay, do you want to bring it back to the next meeting?
Sure.
Or
Because,
well,
I mean, I think it should have...
If you're okay with
meeting on
it.
the 14th, and just add it goals and objectives. Yeah, good catch. Why don't you bring it back on the 14th,
I will.
at our next meeting with that kind of a page and added.
I believe we had a couple that had sample goals and objectives. When we
Yeah.
put them together,
I mean, most of them are pretty
pretty,
smart goals, and,
Yeah.
I mean, they're all the same, but I think it's important to have them in there.
Definitely.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to act on the request of the Recreation Commission to use $9,800 from the World War II Memorial Fund for the purpose of replacing the fence at Memorial Field.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any
if,
discussion?
if this policy is voted, it will virtually deplete that fund. I believe I included in the warrant,
If this request is approved?
yes. Did I? Yeah. I thought I included the history of that account. Did I? What I did, I can't find it. This dates back to the 50s when the field behind the fire station was Memorial Field.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is here. It's just after the National Grid stuff. And a sum of money was put into that fund. And at one time, we used to get donations. I don't believe we see them anymore. And what you have in front of you is 23 years of spending. And in those 23 years,
We zero it out.
10, 11, 13, 15, 16, about $18,000 was used. And ironically, in 16, we used 6,600 for fencing. I don't know which fence. Can you?
Yes, there's a lot of fence around that field, as everybody knows, and it's coming down. It's some of them we replaced back in 2016 because it was dangerous, there was sharp edges sticking out, we were worried about the kids getting cut, and we replaced that, and as we kept on seeing year after year, the fence was just a progression. The Essex Street fence, if you ever seen it, it's bowing out, it's unsafe, it's an eyesore. It desperately needs to be replaced. My understanding is that fence is real old. I've been told 1930, 1940, real old. The good thing about this is that the vertical posts are as good old-fashioned I-beam steel, and that's still good. Regarding the fact that, yes, we do know it's going to pretty much diminish that fund, the recreation revolving account with field usage fees is going to end up taking over any other request as we now get going with that. Memorial Field was in desperate need of being upgraded, and a lot of safety concerns. There still is, but this fence is like the last bit that we need to do to make the field look nice. The money's there, we would like to use it, and then going forward, again, our field usage fees that we collect will end up being able to replace any other little things that need to be done from this point on.
And we would still have $9,275 in the fund.
Right, it doesn't deplete the fund.
Doesn't deplete
No.
it.
I thought you just said it depleted all the.
I
do
said it sort of
believe-
depleted it, yeah.
I do
didn't-
believe there's only 10,600 in that fund right now, Frank. When I talked to the town accountant.
Really? Hang on, let me find it. I was looking at the 19,000, but that's not the balance.
10,590.
That was 2016, I think, balance.
10,590, 8003.
So does it or does it not deplete the account?
There's about $800 left in it.
800?
Yeah. But from this point on, we'll be
Yep.
able to use our field usage.
10,590.03 is what's in there now.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion to spend the money on the
I'll make
fence?
that motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor and almost using all the money in the account?
Aye.
I have to abstain.
You have to abstain?
Yeah, my wife's on the.
Okay. Conflict of interest?
Conflict of interest. Voted okay. You know you have to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Where am I? Act on the request of the recreation, no, we did that. Act on the request of Stephen Morse on behalf of the Veterans of Foreign Affairs, post number 697, to hold the annual Memorial Day Parade on Monday, May 27th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Sounds like a good day to do a parade. All those in favor?
Aye. Good day for a walk.
Act on the request of Stephen Jenkins to be appointed as member of the Whitman Cultural Council for a 3-year term through June 30th, 2021, in order to fill an existing vacancy.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Act on the request of Lorna Holbrook to be appointed as member of the Historical Commission for a 3-year term through June 30th, 2021, in order to fill an existing vacancy.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Glad to see people in.
Act on the request of Laura Andrade to be appointed to the position of member of the Council on Aging for a 3-year term through June 30th, 2021, in order to fill an existing vacancy.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the request of Dennis Leonard on behalf of Holy Ghost Parish for a 1-day liquor license on Friday, May 10th, 2019, in the premises located at 518 Washington Street, in connection with a pasta supper event, and to waive the fee for said permit.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
That just wine? Oh, I kidding.
All those in
Couldn't
favor?
resist.
Aye. May meeting schedule, set it for 5:14 and 5:21?
Right.
Is
Do
that
we need,
okay?
we don't need to meet for the town meeting, right?
We're meeting at 7 o'clock, I think. We usually do.
We usually meet at 7 before town meeting.
All right, so that has to,
So it would be May
7th.
6th,
May
14th.
6th, 14th, and
right,
5:20. We need to go into executive session in order with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A. 1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual. And number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or potential litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining.
so moved.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry, and exception 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general and special law.
So moved.
Second. Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll come back in open session only to adjourn.